2025 is coming to an end, and if you made it this far, pat yourself on the back because you deserve to see the new year. I've seen a lot of YouTubers make these yearly annual recap videos, so I decided to hop on the trend. But if you haven't noticed already, my name is Morbid for Fun, so we're not going to be talking about pop culture, memes, etc., but instead, we'll be diving into tragedies, shootings, attacks, and a lot of death. Before this video starts, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the lives lost to gun violence this year, especially in schools. Every victim had a story, a family, and a future. This year alone, there were 443 mass shootings as of the making of this video, and honestly, by the time this video goes out, I wouldn't be surprised if that number has gone up. I will not be talking about any of those shootings, but I feel like it's appropriate to at least acknowledge it. After all, I cannot include everything in this video, because that would be impossible because there's just so much evil in this world. On January 1st, 2025, we already got shit going on. On that day, a Tesla Cybertruck exploded outside the main entrance of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. The blast came from an improvised explosive device that had been built into the truck, which had been loaded with fireworks, gas canisters, and camping fuel. Before the explosion, the truck's driver, the only person inside, took himself out. 7 bystanders were injured by the explosion, but all survived with relatively minor injuries. The driver was identified as Matthew Livelsberg, a 37-year-old active-duty U.S. Army Special Forces soldier from Colorado Springs who was home on approved leave. Although his body was burned so badly it was nearly unrecognizable, investigators were able to confirm his identity through medical records. Inside the vehicle, authorities also found multiple firearms, including a rifle and 2 pistols. The Cybertruck had been rented through Turo and driven into Las Vegas early that morning. Surveillance and forensic evidence later showed that Matthew had prepared a makeshift detonation system inside the vehicle before parking it directly under the hotel's entrance canopy. Even though the explosion caused a fire, it produced relatively little structural damage and did not shatter the hotel's lobby's door. Hotel guests were evacuated as firefighters worked for about an hour to extinguish the flames. Investigators later learned that Matthew had written 2 digital letters earlier in the month describing plans to use explosives to send a political message and relieve mental stress. He also sent a long email manifesto to a retired Army intelligence officer claiming he was being monitored because he knew about covert operations, advanced U.S. military technology, and an alleged war crime cover-up. In that email, he described plans to flee to Mexico and insisted he wasn't suicidal, contradicting the earlier notes. He asked for the manifesto to be released only after January 1st. The manifesto named a DEA official in his accusations, though the name was redacted due to their active duty status. The retired officer revealed the manifesto publicly to the Sean Ryan Show podcast on January 3rd before turning it over to the FBI. After Matthew's death, his encrypted messaging account showed signs of unauthorized access, raising questions about who might have accessed it. The Cybertruck explosion wasn't the only bad thing that happened on January 1st, because in the early morning hours of January 1st, 2025, a pickup truck attack struck Bourbon Street in New Orleans during New Year celebration. Around 3:15 a.m., the attacker drove a Ford F-150 Lightning onto a crowded sidewalk, bypassing partially malfunctioning barricades meant to block vehicles from entering the French Quarter. The truck sped down a 3-block stretch, striking dozens of pedestrians in what investigators later identified as an intentional mass casualty attack inspired by ISIS. After the truck crashed into a piece of construction equipment, the attacker stepped out wearing body armor and opened fire on police. Officers returned fire and killed him at the scene. 2 officers were wounded in the shootout. Inside the truck, police found an ISIS flag, firearms, and 2 unused pipe bombs. Federal investigators later concluded that the attacker had been radicalized online and carried out the attack without foreign direction. The timing highlighted the tragedy, as the city had increased security for the New Year festivities and the upcoming Sugar Bowl later that day. However, several of the protective bollards in the area had been removed for replacement, and temporary barriers the city owned were not in place when the attack occurred. In total, 14 people were killed by blunt force trauma from the vehicle, and the attacker also died, bringing the total death count to 15. 57 others were injured, including 5 people wounded during the gunfire exchange. The victims ranged from 18 to 63 years old and came from Louisiana, other parts of the United States, and abroad, including one victim from the United Kingdom. Their identities were released by January 5th, and the incident was immediately classified as an act of domestic terrorism. The Palisades Fire was a major Southern California wildfire that ignited in Santa Monica Mountains on January 7, 2025. Driven by extreme Santa Ana winds, it rapidly spread through Pacific Palisades, Topanga, and Malibu, burning over 23,000 acres, destroying 6,800 plus structures, and killing 12 people before firefighters finally contained it on January 31st. It became the third most destructive wildfire in California history and the worst ever recorded within the city limits of Los Angeles. Months later, federal investigators arrested a man in Florida, accusing him of starting a smaller fire on January 1st that never fully went out and later reignited into the Palisades Fire. On January 29, 2025, an American Airlines regional jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air over the Potomac River just half a mile from the runway at Reagan National Airport. The jet was on final approach to Wichita, which the helicopter was performing a night vision training flight out of Davison Army Airfield. Both aircraft were in contact with air traffic control, and the helicopter crew even reported having visual contact with the jet, though investigators believe they may have misidentified it. The two aircraft struck each other at barely 300 feet of altitude, killing all 67 people on board both flights. Bro, I fucking swear if I get any 6-7 comments because of that, I'ma fucking find you guys. A preliminary NTSB report later pointed to dangerously tight altitude spacing between the helicopter corridor and the runway's approach path. Investigators also criticized the FAA for failing to address repeated near-miss warnings in that same area over previous years. That was the end for the January section, but do keep in mind that a lot more crazier stuff happened in that month, but I just cannot cover everything. But onto February. Sam Nordquist was a 24-year-old from Minnesota who traveled to Western New York in late 2024 to meet his online girlfriend. He planned to stay briefly but remained in New York. Over the following months, his family noticed changes in his behavior and eventually lost contact. Multiple requests for wellness checks were made before he was officially reported missing in February 2025. On February 9th, police searched a motel room where Sam had been staying and found evidence of prolonged abuse. Days later, his remains were discovered in a field. Investigators determined that Sam died on February 2nd, 2025, after being held captive and tortured for more than a month. Authorities arrested 7 people, including his girlfriend. Prosecutors alleged that Sam was beaten, essayed, starved, and abused by multiple individuals, and that 2 children were forced to participate. The suspect faced first-degree murder and multiple additional charges. The case drew national attention and has been described by police as one of the most horrific crimes they have ever investigated. On February 23, 2025, 4 people were found dead inside a home in North Lee Street in Bloomington. Police discovered the body Sunday morning and said early on that the incident appeared to be isolated with no threat to the public. Among the dead were a 31-year-old woman, her 13-year-old son, her boyfriend, and a close family friend. Authorities did not immediately release names or the cause of death. What was confirmed was that there were no signs of forced entry, and investigators treated the scene as a signal incident contained within the home. A vigil was held outside the house later that day as the community waited for answers. The 13-year-old victim was an 8th grade student at Bloomington Junior High School. He was active in school activities, athletics, and student organizations. District officials confirmed his death and announced expanded counseling services for students and staff. As of the initial reporting, police had not publicly detailed how the 4 died or the relationships that led up to the incident. The case quickly became one of the deadliest acts of violence in Bloomington in decades, leaving the city searching for clarity while investigators continue their work. From March 13 to 16, 2025, a massive tornado outbreak tore across the Midwest into the eastern United States, becoming the largest March tornado outbreak ever recorded. The Storm Prediction Center even issued a rare day 2 high risk alert for Mississippi and Alabama as conditions pointing toward a major event. Beginning on March 14th, powerful long track tornadoes swept through Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, and nearby states, including multiple EF3s and EF4s that caused severe destruction and several deaths. The outbreak intensified on March 15th as another violent EF4 tore through Mississippi, with additional deadly tornadoes striking Alabama. By March 16th, the system weakened as it reached to the East Coast. Across 4 days, the outbreak produced 118 tornadoes, killed 43 people across 8 states, and caused an estimated $11 billion in damages, making it the costliest tornado outbreak in U.S. history. In March 2025, a fire broke out backstage at Epcot when a walk-in cooler behind the Friends Pavilion caught fire. The thick black smoke rose over the park, and guests near the Ratatouille ride were temporarily evacuated as firefighters responded. The fire was quickly brought under control by the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, and Epcot reopened later that evening. No injuries were reported. On April 2, 2025, 17-year-old Austin McCaff, a student at Memorial High School in Frisco, Texas, was fatally stabbed during a track meet at David Kuykendall Stadium. The incident happened around 10 a.m. after a weather delay pushed athletes into the Memorial team's tent. A dispute began when Austin's twin brother asked a Centennial High School athlete Carmelo Anthony to move out of the tent. Austin then confronted Carmelo, and the argument escalated into pushing. During the altercation, Carmelo pulled out a knife from his backpack and stabbed Austin once in the chest before running. Austin tried to get help but collapsed on the bleachers and was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Carmelo surrendered to the police soon after, emotional and crying, telling officers he was protecting himself and asking whether the situation could be considered self-defense. He was charged with first-degree murder and has pleaded not guilty, with trial set for June 2026. The killing quickly spread online, fueling debate, misinformation, and controversy, amplified further by the racial dynamics between Austin and Carmelo. On April 21, 2025, Pope Francis died at the age of 88 in Vatican City. Francis had served as the head of the Catholic Church for 12 years, making him the second pope in the 21st century to die while still in office. He died from a stroke followed by cardiac arrest, and in the following months, a new pope was elected, Pope Leo. Virginia Giuffre was an American-Australian anti-sex trafficking advocate, best known as one of the most prominent accusers of Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell. She became publicly linked to Epstein in the early 2000s, when she came forward with detailed allegations describing how she was recruited and abused as a teenager within Epstein's network. In 2015, she filed a defamation lawsuit against Maxwell, marking the first major legal case in which she openly accused both Epstein and Maxwell of trafficking and exploitation. Her claims later played a major role in the 2019 release of court documents that helped expose the scope of Epstein's operation and its ties to powerful figures, including former Prince Andrew, whom she also accused in 2019 through interviews and a later civil suit. For years, Virginia became a central voice for survivors. She founded a nonprofit to support trafficking victims, spoke publicly about her experiences, and became one of the most visible people associated with the Epstein case. On April 25, 2025, Virginia died by suicide at the age of 41. Her death shocked the advocacy community and came just months before the release of her posthumous memoir, which was published in October 2025. Her passing marked the loss of one of the most significant and influential voices in the fight against Epstein and Maxwell's abuse. Wi-Fi Skeleton, formerly known as Cyrus, was a creator who first blew up in the YouTube commentary scene before shifting fully into underground music. He built a cult following with his music, and his most recognizable track, Nope, You're Too Late, I Already Died, became the song he was known for. Even with his rebrand, the grooming allegations that ended his commentary career continued to follow him, shaping the way people talked about him online. And while doing research on this case, I did message a few of his friends, and for the most part, all of these allegations are false. On May 5th, 2025, his community learned that he had died from an alleged overdose, announced through a message in the Goth Angels Discord server. According to the post, he was already gone by the time the medics arrived. The night before his body was found, he went live on Instagram and said, "I'm going to overdose tonight and kill myself," leading many to believe the overdose was intentional rather than accidental. But we do not know. On May 27, 2025, rumors exploded online claiming the haunted animal doll had mysteriously gone missing during a national tour, and the internet ran with it, turning the whole thing into a paranormal meme. But the handlers quickly shut it down. Annabelle never went missing, never stolen, and stayed locked in her display the entire time. It was just another viral hoax blown way out of proportion. But somebody did die during the tour. Dan Rivera, a senior lead investigator who spent years with haunted items including the haunted animal doll, died in July of 2025. He died while on the Devils on the Run tour, which featured the doll. Now, did Annabelle really kill Dan? I don't know, but rest in peace. On May 26, 2025, a man named Paul Doyle drove a grey Ford Galaxy into a massive crowd during Liverpool FC's Premier League victory parade. Over 130 people injured, including children. After he accelerated into fans not once but twice, police arrested Doyle on the spot, and investigators later confirmed the attack wasn't terrorism, just an isolated act of violence after he was seen arguing with pedestrians. Doyle was hit with a long list of charges, and after months of hearings, he eventually pleaded guilty to 31 offenses in November 2025. What was supposed to be a celebration for over 1 million fans instantly turned into one of the worst crowd injury events in UK history. And it's a miracle that nobody died. On June 14, 2025, Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were murdered in their home by a gunman impersonating as a police officer. Earlier that same morning, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were also shot in a similar attack but survived. The shootings triggered the largest manhunt in Minnesota history. 57-year-old Vance tried to flee across multiple towns while wearing disguises and using fake police gear. He was captured the next evening after disappearing into farmland. The investigators found Vance had a hit list of nearly 70 political and abortion rights figures, pointing to a planned campaign of political violence. His SUV was loaded with police-style equipment, guns, and notes, suggesting he believed that he was going to war. Prosecutors called the attack premeditated political terrorism, and Vance eventually pled guilty to 31 charges, including murder and attempted murder. The killing sparked nationwide panic, forced protests in Minnesota to be canceled, and triggered a wave of misinformation online. Both left-wing and right-wing influencers falsely blamed each other until investigators confirmed Vance acted alone. Thousands attended Hortman's memorial, marking one of the most shocking and politically motivated murders in modern state history. On June 29, 2025, someone deliberately started a brush fire on the side of Canfield Mountain in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, then waited for firefighters to arrive. As engines pulled up to what they thought was a routine wildland fire, 20-year-old Wes opened fire with a 12-gauge shotgun, killing 2 chiefs and critically injuring another firefighter. Crews had to abandon the fire line and hide behind their rigs, while police locked down nearby neighborhoods and launched a massive manhunt in the hills. After about 5 hours, officers found Wes dead, who apparently took himself out and was found near the fire zone. Investigators say he'd intentionally set the blaze to lure in unarmed first responders to ambush them, but they still haven't found a clear motive. The attack shocked the firefighting community nationwide and reignited fears about growing violence against firefighters and EMS workers. On July 4, 2025, a stalled storm system dumped up to 20+ inches of rain over the Texas Hill Country, making the Guadalupe River jump around 26 feet in 45 minutes and wiping out riverside communities in the dark. At least 135 people were killed, including dozens at Camp Mystic, a girls' summer camp that sat deep in the floodplain. The disaster sparked huge multi-state rescue efforts and a national backlash over why an area nicknamed Flash Flood Alley still had no effective local siren or flood warning system. despite decades of deadly floods. In early July 2025, a hospital video went viral claiming to show a man named Kadan Salem walking around after being declared dead. TikTok and Instagram labeled it terminal lucidity, the Lazarus effect, and even called the man a real-life zombie. But none of these claims were ever verified. The name Salem only appeared in captions, and no hospital or official record ever confirmed who he was or what actually happened. Around that same time, TikTok memorial videos for a young man named Salom began circulating, causing people online to link the two events together, but the connection was based solely on appearance, Arabic text in the room, and timing. No confirmed identity, cause of death, or legitimate source was ever released for either the clip or the memorial posts. Ultimately, the zombie video became an unverified internet myth. Despite millions of views in early July, the true identity of the man and the real context behind the footage is still unknown. In mid-July 2025, a kiss cam moment at a Coldplay concert went viral after astronomer CEO Andy Byron and Chief People Officer Kristen Cabot awkwardly dodged the camera, Kristen covering her face and Andy ducking away. Chris Martin joked they were either having an affair or very shy, which sent the clip exploding across social media. The fallout was immediate. Both executives resigned, sparking a full-blown corporate crisis. I felt like adding this one for fun. It's not technically a tragedy because I'm pretty sure the woman was already divorced by the time the kiss cam thing happened, but the same can't be said for the guy. On July 22nd, the legendary Ozzy Osbourne passed away at the age of 76. And 2 days later, WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan passed away at the age of 71. On July 28, 2025, 27-year-old Shane Tamura carried out a mass shooting inside a Midtown Manhattan office tower at 345 Park Avenue, killing 4 people, including an off-duty NYPD officer, before taking himself out. Shane entered the building wearing body armor and armed with a rifle, opening fire in the lobby before moving to the 33rd floor, where he killed an additional victim. Investigators later discovered his car parked with weapons and a note requesting his brain to be studied for CTE, suggesting he believed football-related head trauma had damaged his mind. Police confirmed he had a history of mental health crisis in Nevada, along with prior arrest and surveillance industry work experience. Officials say Shane appeared to be fixated on the NFL offices located in the same building, believing the league was responsible for his alleged injuries, and his motive remains under investigation. On August 22, 2025, 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Uryana Zaruska was stabbed to death on the Lynx Blue Line in Charlotte, North Carolina. Surveillance video showed 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr. suddenly stabbing her 3 times from behind before leaving the train, where he was immediately arrested. The killing sparked national outrage. Brown had a long history of arrest and untreated schizophrenia, raising questions about North Carolina's mental health system and transit security. The case became heavily politicized, drawing statements from Charlotte officials, North Carolina leaders, and President Donald Trump. In response, lawmakers passed Uryana's Law, a sweeping criminal justice reform package that tightened bail rules, expanded mental health evaluations, and reviewed efforts toward capital punishment in the state. Vigils and murals were created in her memory, and Zaruska was buried in the U.S. In September 2025, a major scandal erupted around the artist David after heavily decomposed human remains were discovered inside the front trunk of a Tesla registered to him. The car had been abandoned in a Hollywood Hills neighborhood for over a week before being impounded, and tow yard workers called the police after noticing a strong odor. Inside the frunk, investigators found a black bag containing a partially dismembered body. On September 16, the remains were identified as 14-year-old Celeste Hernandez, who had been missing for over a year. Photos later surfaced showing Celeste and David together, along with reports that they had matching tattoos and had been living in the same rental property. Authorities believe they were most likely in a relationship, a detail that immediately raised concerns, since David was an adult while Celeste was underage. Because of the advanced decomposition, her exact cause of death remains unknown. though investigators believe she likely died months earlier. The LAPD searched a Hollywood Hills home tied to David and seized electronics, looking for evidence of what happened. While no charges have been filed, the case is being treated as a potential homicide. And some people would even call it a romantic homicide. And detectives have suggested that more than one person may have been involved in disposing the body. And till this day, investigation is still ongoing. In September 2025, a 3-volume birthday album made for Jeffrey Epstein, The First 50 Years, was released publicly and instantly became one of the biggest scandals of the year. Created in 2003 by Maxwell, the book was filled with letters, jokes, drawings, and personal messages from Epstein's friends and associates. Most were harmless, but some were disturbingly explicit, including a cartoon showing Epstein giving gifts to young girls and later being massaged by topless women. The leak went viral when the Wall Street Journal revealed a controversial entry allegedly written and signed by Donald Trump, framed around a hand-drawn outline of a naked girl and ending with the line, "May every day be another wonderful secret." Trump denied it and launched a $10 billion lawsuit, but the copy released by the House Oversight Committee matched the journal's description. Letters from Bill Clinton, Leon Black, Alan Dershowitz, Vera Wang, and others also appeared in the album, though most of them declined to comment. The release reignited worldwide scrutiny of Epstein's network, triggered political fallout, and even led to the dismissal of British Ambassador Peter Mandelson after newly exposed correspondence showed deeper ties to Epstein. What began as a private 50th birthday gift resurfaced 2 decades later as a massive public scandal. On September 10, 2025, Charlie Kirk was assassinated during a Turning Point USA event at Utah Valley University. While taking questions under a campus tent, Kirk was struck in the neck by a single round fired from a rooftop roughly 142 yards away. The next day, 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson surrendered to authorities and was later charged with aggravated murder, with prosecutors announcing they would seek the death penalty. Early statements suggested the attack was politically motivated. Footage of the shooting went viral almost immediately, fueling intense political reactions online. National leaders condemned the killing, while other people used the event to blame political opponents, escalating an already tense climate. Kirk's memorial service took place on September 21st at State Farm Stadium. On September 15, 2025, 21-year-old Delta State University student Trey Reed was found hanging from a tree on campus. Authorities quickly ruled it as self-inflicted, but Reed's family and civil rights leaders immediately challenged that conclusion, arguing the investigation was rushed and incomplete. The case sparked national controversy, with many pointing to Mississippi's long history of racial violence and insisting Reed may have been a victim of a targeted killing. Calls for an independent autopsy and federal review grew after conflicting details were reported to the family. Today, Reed's death remains heavily disputed, with supporters believing the initial ruling ignored the possibility of foul play. On September 29, 2025, 2 17-year-olds, Maria and Isabella, were struck and killed while riding e-bikes in Cranford, New Jersey. The driver was a 17-year-old male who, according to neighbors, had been stalking one of the girls for months, with repeated reports made to the school and police that seemingly went nowhere. After hitting the girls and dragging one of the bikes until his black Jeep Compass became disabled, he fled the scene, went home, and according to multiple local reports, launched a Fortnite stream as if nothing happened, which quickly became a disturbing focus of public outrage. As the story spread online, it was also alleged that the teen was a vocal Charlie Kirk supporter, adding another layer of speculation around the motive, since one of the girls posted a negative comment about Charlie on the day he died. Though police have not confirmed any ideological connection, the case remains under investigation and charges are still pleading. On October 10, 2025, a massive explosion at the Accurate Energetic Systems plant in Humphreys County, Tennessee killed 16 workers and injured several others. The blast, detected on weather radar and heard for miles, destroyed a building where TNT and C4 related materials were handled. Federal agencies responded and investigators later confirmed it started with a chain reaction in the facility's heating kettles. Federal agencies and investigators later confirmed it started with a chain reaction in the facility's heating kettles, which ignited over 24,000 pounds of stored explosives. AES had previous safety issues, including a 2014 fatal explosion and OSHA findings in 2019. After the disaster, the company ceased operations, and families filed wrongful death lawsuits, accusing AES's parent company of failing to maintain safe conditions. On October 13, 2025, multiple human remains were discovered at a desert junkyard in Palmdale after a resident's dog brought home what appeared to be a human skull. The property, listed as Speed Motors Auto Repair and Body, was searched by LA County medical examiners, who focused on a blue SUV and a storage container. Investigators have not yet determined how many victims are involved, and the case is still in its early stages. The 2025 Louvre heist took place on October 19, 2025, when thieves disguised as construction workers stole 8 pieces of the French crown jewels worth an estimated $88 million from the gallery in under 8 minutes. Using a furniture lift to reach the balcony, the crew cut through the window, threatened guards with power tools, smashed display cases, and fled on motor scooters along the scene. One piece, the crown of Empress Eugenie, was dropped and recovered damaged. The robbery exposed major security failures at the Louvre, including limited camera coverage and outdated systems. Within a week, authorities arrested 2 men from Seine Saint-Denis, followed by several more suspects, though only 5 have been formally charged. The jewels themselves remain missing. The incident prompted national outrage, political criticism, and an emergency outhaul of museum security across France. On November 4, 2025, UPS Airlines Flight 2976 crashed seconds after takeoff from Louisiana when its left engine broke off the wing and ignited a fire, killing all 3 crew members and 11 people on the ground. The MD-11 rolled left after the engine separation, hit a UPS warehouse and fuel tanks, and slammed into a truck's yard, injuring more than 20 others. The crash shut down the airport, triggered shelter-in-place orders, and led UPS, FedEx, and Western Global to ground all MD-11 aircraft. Multiple lawsuits accuse UPS, Boeing, and GE of negligence. Early NTSB findings point to metal fatigue cracks in the engine pylon as the main cause, with the investigation still going on. On November 17, 2025, Bethany McGee was set on fire on a Chicago Blue Line train after Lawrence Reed, a 50-year-old with 72 prior arrests, poured gasoline on her and ignited it. McGee survived with critical burns. Reed was arrested hours later, caught on camera buying the gasoline beforehand, and was charged with federal terrorism. The attack sparked national outrage and renewed criticism of Illinois' pre-trial monitoring system, since Reed was already out on electronic monitoring for a previous violent case. On November 28, 2025, a shooting broke out at Westfield Valley Fair in San Jose during Black Friday crowds, injuring 3 people, a man, a woman, and a 16-year-old girl. Police said it was an isolated confrontation, not an active shooter situation. Including 2 investigators, the gunman got into an argument with the male victim, pulled a firearm, and opened fire, hitting the 2 female victims with stray rounds. All 3 survived with non-threatening injuries. The mall reopened the next day, and on December 1st, San Jose police arrested the suspect shooter, later labeling the incident a gang-related dispute. On December 13th, John Cena had his last WWE match as Saturday's Night Main Event in Washington, D.C. Cena tapped out to Gunther, making it the first time Cena has tapped out in 20 years. What a huge fucking tragedy. In December 2025, a mass shooting took place at Brown University during final exam week. On the afternoon of December 13th, a masked gunman entered the School of Engineering and opened fire inside a lecture hall where students were attending a review session. 2 students were killed and 9 others were wounded before the shooter fled the building. Campus alerts were sent warning of an active shooter, followed by confusion as police searched for the suspect. Surveillance footage later showed the gunman moving through areas with limited camera coverage before exiting the campus. 2 days later, on December 15th, MIT physics professor Nuno was shot multiple times inside his apartment building in Brookline, Massachusetts. He later died from his injuries. Ballistics testing linked the firearm used in Nuno's killing to the same weapon used in the Brown University shooting. After a 5-day manhunt involving local police and the FBI, authorities located the suspect on December 18th inside a storage unit in New Hampshire. The suspect, Claudio, a former Brown University doctoral student, was found dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. 2 firearms were recovered at the scene. Police concluded that Claudio acted alone. The shootings left 3 people dead, injured 9 others, and became one of the most serious acts of campus violence in the United States in 2025. On December 14, 2025, a mass shooting occurred at Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia during a Hanukkah celebration attended by around 1,000 people. At 6:47 p.m., 2 gunmen opened fire on the crowd, killing 15 people, including a 10-year-old child, and injuring dozens more. Authorities later identified the attack as an ISIS-inspired terrorist assault motivated by anti-Semitism. The attackers fired from a pedestrian footbridge overlooking the event and threw multiple homemade explosive devices, none of which went off. Panic spread as people fled the area while emergency services rushed to the scene. During the attack, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, an unarmed 43-year-old Syrian-Australian, ran towards the gunfire. Using parked cars as cover, he approached one of the shooters from behind and physically disarmed him, briefly preventing further shots. Ahmed was shot multiple times during the confrontation but survived. Police officers then engaged the gunman, killing one at the scene and critically wounding the other, who was taken into custody. The attack was later confirmed as the deadliest terror incident in modern Australian history and led to nationwide mourning, heightened security at Jewish sites, and renewed debates over extremism and public safety. On December 14, 2025, filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Reiner were found dead inside their home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Both had surfaced multiple sharp force injuries, and the deaths were ruled a double homicide by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner. The couple were discovered in the afternoon after their daughter fled the house and a roommate called 911. Los Angeles police initially responded to the scene as a death investigation before determining it was a homicide and transferring the case to LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division. Later that same day, police arrested the Reiner's 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, near the University of Southern California. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with a special circumstance for multiple victims. Prosecutors have not yet announced whether they will seek the death penalty. Authorities have not publicly released a motive. Nick Reiner is being held without bail. The killing sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond, marking one of the most high-profile domestic homicide cases in Los Angeles in decades. On December 15, 2025, federal authorities announced they had disputed a planned bombing campaign in Southern California tied to a little-known far-left extremist group called the Turtle Island Liberation Front. 4 suspects were arrested in San Bernardino County after investigators tracked them to the Mojave Desert, where they were allegedly testing homemade explosive devices. According to the Department of Justice, the group planned to carry out a coordinated backpack bombing on New Year's Eve, targeting 2 large logistic facilities described as Amazon-type companies. The bombs were intended to detonate simultaneously at midnight, though officials said the suspects claimed they did not intend to cause casualties. Surveillance footage captured the group unloading bomb-making materials and assembling devices under a tent in the desert. FBI agents intervened before any functional bombs were completed, arresting the suspects on the spot. All 4 were charged with conspiracy and possession of an unregistered destructive device, with prosecutors indicating additional charges may follow. A 5th individual linked to the same group was arrested separately in Louisiana and charged with making interstate threats after being stopped with weapons and tactical gear. Federal officials described the case as a prevented domestic terror plot and warned that fringe extremist groups continue to escalate from rhetoric into real-world violence. On December 19th, we got a huge update on the Epstein files. They finally released them. Kinda. We only got a few sentences, while the majority of it is redacted. The whole thing looks like a barcode. It is extremely sad how these files are not yet released, but I got even worse news to break to you. Winnie the Pooh is on the list. That is right, a photo surfaced of Winnie the Pooh with Epstein. That is extremely heartbreaking. Thank you guys so much for watching till the end of this video, and I typically don't force you guys, but can you please like the video and subscribe for this one? Because I'm trying to edit this video in under 2 days. Yeah, it normally takes me a week to release a 12-minute video, but I gotta get this 30 to 40 minute video out in under 2 days, and I think I could do it. And if this video does not come out on December 30th, then you'll see it eventually. But yeah, thank you guys so much, and you better have a great 2026.